Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the Unsportsmanlike Conduct podcast, a podcast for the average Joe covering football, my beloved New York Giants, some baseball and basketball from time to time, and any other current events impacting our sports world. Before I get started with today's agenda, everyone please follow me on Instagram. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. Again, that's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. I'm also on Twitter now, so everyone please follow me on Twitter. That's _unsportsman. And lastly, but most importantly, if you're listening to this, you might as well subscribe. So everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube page. So today's agenda, man, is this year's preseason going to be the most preseason for my beloved New York Giants, head coach Pat Shurmur, defensive coordinator James Bettcher, Dave Gettleman, and all of these young guys that we just drafted in this past year's NFL draft. Let's get this episode started. So I'll be honest, folks. The preseason doesn't usually get me hyped up. A preseason is something that I end up typically glancing over. I think, there's a lot of, it's not that good football to watch. It's not that as competitive. There's not that much good talent. And, as of the last, I wouldn't even say as of the last several years, but ever since I started watching football, there hasn't been really, anyone there hasn't been a story for the New York Giants of what to really watch out for when it came to the New York Giants. This is the first time there's a quarterback that we've drafted that has the potential that's actually threatening the starting job of Eli Manning. And then we also drafted so many young studs on the defensive side of the ball that you know for a fact that those boys are going to lead this defense for years to come. I've mentioned this time and time again on my podcast that those boys, those young DBs, Dexter Lawrence, and then even a few of the second-year players like B.J. Hill and Lorenzo Carter are going to lead this defense for a very, very long time. This is the future for the New York Giants. Dave Gettleman came in here, blew up this team, and is slowly rebuilding it. And this is the first time in a very long time that I'm actually looking at this New York Giants roster, and I want to see what our young guys got. And I think the best way to figure out where you stand or where you can maybe gauge how this season is going to turn out or how your talent is going to turn out is in the preseason. This is where a lot of our young guys, especially everyone that we've drafted in the 2019 draft, need to get a ton of reps in preseason. This preseason is so important for the New York Giants because we drafted Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is expected at some point of the season to probably start in place of Eli Manning. But then if he doesn't start this year, he's definitely going to start next year for the New York Giants. And then we have a lot of young DBs and some young defensive linemen as well. We drafted Dexter Lawrence with the 17th overall pick. We drafted DeAndre Baker and Julian Love. We have first-year New York Giant Jabril Peppers, who's had a hot and cold career so far in his first 2 years with the Cleveland Browns. This is the guy that's expected to replace Landon Collins. So from a playbook and scheme perspective, I expect Jabril Peppers to get some good amount of snaps during the preseason. And then we have Corey Ballantyne. And then we have a young stud from the offensive perspective when we drafted Darius Slayton. And Daniel Jones and Darius Slayton have built a rapport during the training camp and mini camps. So we have so many young moving parts on this New York Giants team. It's imperative for this coaching staff, both Pat Shurmur as a head coach, Mike Shula as our offensive coordinator, and James Bettcher as our defensive coordinator, to make sure that our guys, especially this past draft class, gets enough snaps. Because these guys are potentially going to start in this season. These guys are supposed to lead our defense for years to come. Daniel Jones is supposed to be the future quarterback for the New York Giants. Darius Slayton, given the recent injuries, and I'll get to it in a few, given our recent injuries, and given the fact that Golden Tate is going to be suspended for 4 games, Darius Slayton, rookie wide receiver out of Auburn, is going to have to step up and legitimately emerge as a wide receiver threat. The Giants are going to have to trust Darius Slayton that week 1 coming against Dallas Cowboys, they can start him. This is a huge preseason for Darius Slayton. So many young moving parts for this team. And I actually want to start with the receivers. So as everyone knows, Sterling Shepard fractured his thumb And right now he's sort of week to week at the moment. He won't be practicing. And, the reports are saying that he's expected to start week 1. But no one truly knows how bad that fractured thumb is. I don't know. Is it broken or is it just fractured? And the worst thing about this type of injury is, look, Sterling Shepard isn't going to lose his explosiveness, right? This isn't an injury where Sterling Shepard is going to lose his ability to make sharp cuts, to plant his foot on the ground, make sharp turns. He'll still be able to effectively break in between his routes. And that's what he's going to have to do, because that's what that type of receiver that Sterling Shepard is. He's a guy that's going to be in the slot, and they're going to give him some complex routes to run, which involves a lot of breaks, planting your foot hard, right? Moving your ankle into certain angles to sort of put pressure on DBs, during man coverage, or faking out DBs during zone coverage. So thankfully, this is only a hand injury and not a leg injury. So I'm telling fans, well, hey, this isn't the biggest deal in the world, because, I don't know, maybe they can wrap the thumb up. Maybe he can still be out there and play some snaps, but maybe, I don't know how serious this injury is. But let's just say Sterling Shepard misses a couple of games. Then we're thin at wide receiver. Because in our next injury that happened, exactly a day after Sterling Shepard fractured his thumb, someone who was most likely going to be a slot receiver for the New York Giants, Corey Coleman, tears his ACL and is going to be out for the rest of the year. So now that's going to put pressure on a lot of our other wide receivers. Benny Fowler, Cody Latimer, and most importantly, Darius Slayton. And the reason why I emphasize Darius Slayton is because Benny Fowler and Cody Latimer, they've been in the NFL. There's a reason why they've never been legitimate wide receiver options in any of the teams that they've been part of. There's a reason why they almost get no snaps during regular season games. There's a reason why they're not even third-string wide receivers on any other team that they would have been on or have been on in the past. So Darius Slayton, this starting wide receiver job is essentially open for Darius Slayton. This is Darius Slayton's job to lose. He has to emerge in this offseason before week 1 against Dallas. The same way Victor Cruz emerged several years ago, where he just emerged in preseason, had an amazing preseason, and ended up being one of the best wide receivers that the New York Giants ever had. And I want to get to one more point before I further expand on Darius Slayton. Everyone knows what happened with Golden Tate. Golden Tate is potentially facing a 4-game suspension, and this is because him and his wife were going through fertility treatment, and Golden Tate was actually on a pill. There was an ingredient in the pill, and that ingredient so happened to be on the NFL banned substance list. Apparently, though, once Golden Tate found out that that ingredient was included in the pill and on the NFL banned substance list, he stopped taking the pill, and he notified, the coaches, New York Giants management, and was apparently fully transparent with respects to taking this pill. However, hypothetically speaking, Golden Tate, if he gets suspended for the first 4 games, let's say Sterling Shepard's out for 2 to 3 games, and we all know Corey Coleman is not going to be on the Giants this year. We have no one at receiver besides Evan Ingram. Now Evan Ingram becomes that much more easier to defend because defenses will focus in on him. He may get hit with some double coverages. And that's why a guy like Darius Slayton, rookie wide receiver, has to show what he's capable of, not only in training camp, but in preseason. And so I urge Pat Shurmur to give Darius Slayton a ton of snaps. Make him play 3 quarters. If you don't want to play Daniel Jones all 4 quarters, that's fine. But maybe you play Darius Slayton all 4 quarters and have him play with Daniel Jones. Have him play with the third-string quarterback, Kyle Lauletta. Let him play, let him read and figure out defensive coverages. Because he's only going to have 4 games to do that before the regular season starts against the Dallas Cowboys. And I mentioned this on my podcast. The Dallas Cowboys have one of the most deepest secondaries in the NFL. Probably has one of the best secondaries in the NFC East division. And you do not want to open the season with an offensive blunder. I mean, we will definitely have trouble week 1 moving the ball down the field if we don't have Sterling Shepard in that game, and we're probably most likely not going to have Golden Tate, because the thing with Golden Tate is, I don't think that 4-game suspension, look, Golden Tate said he's going to fight that 4-game suspension because he believes he's innocent. He believes that he didn't, and hopefully it's true, it sounded innocent. I'm sure a lot of you folks saw that large statement that he released on social media. But I don't think when Golden Tate fights that 4-game suspension, I don't think the 4 games will get removed. I think the 4 games just get reduced. I think that 4 games may end up turning into 2 games. So moving the ball against the Dallas Cowboys in week 1 is going to be tough. And we're gonna find ourselves being a smash-mouth football team. Saquon Barkley may end up getting 25 to 30 carries that game. And then in total, he may touch the ball about 35 to 40 times, considering that there's going to be even more pressure on Saquon Barkley to get receptions when those guys are out. That's why Darius Slayton, this is his chance. I call Darius Slayton our burner. I call Darius Slayton our Deshaun Jackson. And again, Darius Slayton did not have the same 40 time as Deshaun Jackson, so I'm not saying that they're both the same in terms of speed and quickness and how fast that they are. But I believe that Darius Slayton is potentially our fastest receiver, and he's the guy that we can utilize on seam routes. And seam routes are usually the most hardest routes to defend. Because a lot of the safeties that are over the top are usually too concerned with defending the wide outs that are lined up all the way to the wide left or wide right, that the middle of the field ends up getting exposed. So if Darius Slayton can't run his routes well in the slot position, then that's going to put a handicap on the rest of the offense and on the rest of the receivers. Benny Fowler, Cody Latimer, Evan Ingram, they know how to run routes. They'll figure out a way. They understand the playbook. But Benny Fowler and Cody Latimer aren't legitimate wide receiver threats, and we know that. We've seen that. So now we're heading into week 1, potentially heading into week 1. We are couple of weeks away from heading into week 1. And we'll probably not start off the season, not even just week 1 against Dallas, but we'll probably start off the first couple of games without Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. This is the time for Darius Slayton to emerge as a premier wide receiver option. I'm not talking about I don't want to place this expectation that he has to be like an Odell Beckham Jr. or a top 10, not even a top 15 wide receiver. But dude, you got to step up. And the coaches have to put Darius Slayton in a position during preseason to learn, get his reps, and get a chance to showcase his abilities. I don't care where you're drafted in the NFL draft. There's a reason why you get drafted. It's because that team believes in you. Showcase your talents, showcase your abilities, because this is going to be big time for you. No one's heading into this season thinking that the New York Giants defense is going to be bad. All eyes are on the New York Giants offense, and it almost always has been over the last couple of years. Because even when we had OBJ, we still couldn't score the ball that well. We couldn't move the ball down the field. Now we have a legitimate offensive line, but we're short on some receivers, obviously because of the OBJ trade and injuries to some other receivers like Sterling Shepard, Corey Coleman, and then this unfortunate suspension that came down on Golden Tate. So this is very, very important for Pat Shurmur and Mike Shula, the offensive coordinator, to actually pull Darius Slayton aside and actually let him know, like, hey, dude, we are going to count on you. Yeah, it's early in the year, but you need to show us what you got, kid. Because if he can't, I don't think he makes it past year 1 in terms of someone that can lead the Giants into the future. Don't get me wrong, he'll probably stay with the Giants during his rookie contract. I mean, that contract's got to be cheap because he was probably, I think, a 6th-round pick. But this is a very important preseason for Darius Slayton, and unfortunately, it comes during his first preseason because he's a rookie. And another player, probably the most important player heading into this preseason for the New York Giants currently and for the future, is going to be first-round pick, 6th overall, Daniel Jones, the quarterback that's expected to take over Eli Manning's starting role. Daniel Jones may not start this year, but he will definitely start next year. And I've said this time and time again. I've even dedicated a whole episode on the strategy for managing Daniel Jones going forward. Daniel Jones needs to get first-team reps in preseason, and he needs to play at least 2 quarters in every single preseason game. No ifs, ands, or buts. You cannot afford to have a failed, executed preseason plan for Daniel Jones and expect Daniel Jones the following year, next season, to come in and start for the New York Giants and expect him to win games. Preseason right now is the closest thing that you can get to see how Daniel Jones will operate in a first-team offense against some first-string and second-string defenses. And second-string defenses aren't bad defenses either. I mean, those are the guys who are usually rotating with first-team players on that defense. Those are the guys that are immediately in charge of stepping up when some of those first-team guys get injured or having slumps. Daniel Jones needs to start against that type of quality talent. If Daniel Jones doesn't start at least 2 quarters, or play at least 2 quarters, and he needs to start, by the way, in all these preseason games, then Pat Shurmur has failed as a head coach. And he's failing to groom Daniel Jones as a future quarterback for the New York Giants. And then as a result, you'll end up failing the execution and the vision that Dave Gettleman has had for Daniel Jones and this New York Giants offense for years to come. Dave Gettleman has set this team up pretty decently for Daniel Jones to come in and help us win ball games. He's rebuilt this offensive line. I don't think it's complete, but he's rebuilt this offensive line. He's given us a great once-in-a-lifetime generational running back with Saquon Barkley. He re-signed Sterling Shepard. We still have Evan Ingram under his rookie contract. And we drafted Darius Slayton, and we also signed Golden Tate, who's going to be on the team for the next 3-4 years. So Daniel Jones can come in, and he might have some success. It's not like our offense doesn't have any weapons at all. We just don't have the weapon, which was Odell Beckham. But if Daniel Jones, if you don't prepare him in preseason and figure out how he's actually going to hold up against some of these first-team defenses, all of these schemes and blitz packages in the NFL, then how are you so sure that he's going to be ready next season? How are you so sure he's going to be ready come, week 8 or week 9 when the Giants may end up being mathematically out of the playoffs? Maybe the Giants season doesn't go the way I predicted it with the 9-7 record and just missing the playoffs, because I have the Giants just missing the playoffs. I don't have the Giants being out of the playoff race early in this coming season. I mean, granted, my predictions came before the Sterling Shepard injury and the Golden Tate suspension, but obviously more to come on that. If the New York Giants are mathematically eliminated from the season within week 7 or 8, and maybe not that early mathematically, maybe there's still some chance. But let's just say for argument's sake, you are mathematically out of the playoff race if you're fucking 2-7. Okay? If the Giants are 2-7 or 3-6 or what have you, you're out of the playoff race because there's no way you're probably going to be able to chase Philly and Dallas in the NFC East division. And if that's the case, how do you expect Daniel Jones to come in and start the rest of the season? Because that's most likely when you'll have Daniel Jones come in. You're going to take a step back and say, look, Eli, we're not making it to the playoffs, and we'd like to sort of throw Daniel Jones in there and see what he's got. That is the worst time to throw someone in there. The best time right now, before doing that, is to start him in preseason and put him under some heat. Let him make mistakes. Don't go into panic mode when he has a bad preseason. Don't go into panic mode when he makes bad plays or bad decisions. Let him make mistakes. Let him throw interceptions. Let him poorly read a defense. Let him mistakenly not pick up and call an audible on a blitz package. Let him do that stuff, because the worst thing that's going to happen to him if you don't let him do that and learn in those preseason games, and I'm not saying he's going to get all of it down in those 4 preseason games, but at least he'll have some sort of an idea of what an NFL offense and an NFL defense looks like. But the worst thing you could ever do is not give him the proper amount of preparation in preseason and then throw him into the fire in the middle of the season. And again, I want to sort of recircle back. When Daniel Jones ends up starting for the New York Giants, if he does in this season, it's going to be because the New York Giants are no longer in the playoff race. And when the New York Giants won't be in the playoff race, that means New York Giants fans and the New York media is going to be hounding on the New York Giants players, coaching staff, and management. the whole organization as a whole. And then the last thing you want to show New York Giants fans in the media is that Daniel Jones is not ready when he starts playing in Week 8 and Week 9. And so I urge Pat Shurmur and Mike Shula to prepare Daniel Jones well enough in training camp and then prepare him and actually have a legitimate game plan and organization for him to go into preseason and play legitimate snaps. Eli Manning is a 16-year vet. He does not need to take a single snap in preseason. That should all go to Daniel Jones and Kyle Lauletta. Let Daniel Jones start the first half. Let Kyle Lauletta start the second half. Personally, if it were up to me, I would like Daniel Jones to play the whole game. But I know that's not how preseason works. I understand that in preseason you need to essentially go through the whole depth chart. Your rotation is your whole depth chart in preseason. So I understand that. I know that would be unrealistic to have Daniel Jones play a whole game of preseason ball. And at the end of the day, what do you have to lose? That's sort of the million-dollar question that no one can answer. You have nothing to lose by starting Daniel Jones and giving him a ton of snaps in preseason. And look, Sterling Shepard may not be able to play in preseason, but if I'm not even entirely sure, but I think Golden Tate may be able to play in preseason. And if Golden Tate can't play in preseason given the pending suspension, definitely have Daniel Jones play with Evan Ingram. Like, have him learn something. Have him play with the offensive linemen. Have him play with a starting lineup that consists of Nate Soldier, Will Hernandez, Kevin Zeitler, right? Like, I want the starting guys there in front of Daniel Jones. I mean, let this offensive line trust in Daniel Jones. That's a very important part of a quarterback's development, is that his offensive line trusts him to move the ball down the field and lead that team to score points. And I don't know how much snaps that Saquon Barkley is going to get. I don't know how they're going to manage that. But if Saquon Barkley ends up getting a crap ton of touches in the preseason, then have him hand off to Saquon Barkley, because that's what the future of this New York Giants offense is going to look like. Eli Manning has one more year with this offensive line. Eli Manning has one more year of handing the ball off to Saquon Barkley. Okay? Eli Manning should not be your concern or focus in this offseason and in this preseason. Daniel Jones should be. I want Daniel Jones to learn how to throw and find Saquon Barkley open on pass plays, because that's what we're going to be doing. We're utilizing Saquon Barkley the same way the Steelers used Le'Veon Bell. That's going to be the same utilization rate, especially because we got some injuries and suspensions coming our way to our receivers. Let's get this right, Pat Shurmur, because you know what? You didn't have the greatest first year as a head coach, but you got a big pass. Second year as a head coach with Mike Shula as an offensive coordinator, there's going to be a lot of pressure to get this New York Giants future offense correct. And it starts by preparing Daniel Jones this offseason in this preseason. From an offensive standpoint, those are the two guys, Darius Slayton and Daniel Jones, that Pat Shurmur and company need to focus on. They need to build a development plan heading into the preseason and during preseason games for both Darius Slayton and Daniel Jones to develop as young players. Because Darius Slayton is going to be getting a lot of snaps this season. He is, given the fact that we are going to have a suspension with Golden Tate. Corey Coleman is out the whole year. Sterling Shepard might miss a couple of games, but then after that, there is no other wide receiver that we can truly rely on. We've seen what we can get out of Benny Fowler. We've seen what we can get out of Cody Latimer. So this option, again, and I've said this, not too long ago in this episode, I think the next person's starting job at wide receiver is for Darius Slayton to lose. I think he should be able to grab this in the bag. And then for Daniel Jones, you probably won't be starting week 1, but you may start week 8 when we only have 1 to 2 or 3 wins. And again, that's if my New York Giants 9-7 prediction doesn't work out as I projected. Then Daniel Jones, you're going to have to get ready by week 8 to start and show us Giants fans, us frustrated Giants fans at this point. Because if Daniel Jones starts this year again, it's because the Giants aren't having a great season, and if the Giants don't have a great season, New York Giants fans are going to be frustrated. So you want to start off with a good first impression, Jones. But that's not going to be all on him. That's going to be a lot on Pat Shurmur and Mike Shula. And don't be surprised if a horrible season where it clearly shows that our young guys aren't developing results in Pat Shurmur being on the hot seat. And I don't want to, sort of jump the gun and say Pat Shurmur ends up getting fired if that happens this year, but expect him to definitely be on the hot seat heading into next season if this Daniel Jones pick doesn't look like it's working out. Because you cannot always blame the general managers for picking the wrong players. Because sometimes these players also rely on coaches for development. These guys are kids. Daniel Jones is younger than me. I'm 26 years old. Daniel Jones I don't even know how he has to be in his early 20s if he's just out of college. I mean, these guys need development. They need the right coaches, the right offensive coordinators. So if Daniel Jones doesn't work out, this isn't all on Dave Gettleman. A lot of it has to be on Pat Shurmur, because you'd like to think that Pat Shurmur and Mike Shula kind of gave the sign-off on drafting this quarterback, especially with the 6th overall pick. And I said this after we drafted him, while I was frustrated that we drafted him. I'm over it now, but when I was frustrated when we drafted him, I talked about the fact that if this pick does not work, it sets our franchise back for many, many years. Because as you all know, you win Super Bowls with a good defense and a good quarterback. A quarterback that can win games and make every NFL throw. And you find that out, and you can gauge that by giving him legitimate preseason snaps. So from an offensive perspective, there's not too much to worry about heading into the preseason. There isn't too much to prepare for. Focus your preparation and your development plans for those 2 young guys. Because in the regular season, again, Darius Slayton will get a lot of snaps. Because now our talent and our depth chart at wide receiver is thin. And then Daniel Jones is the future of this New York Giants team. So you have to make sure that this preseason and offseason in its entirety goes as planned and is successful. And that's going to lie all on Pat Shurmur as the head coach and someone who's known to be someone who can work really well with quarterbacks and who is supposed to be an offensive guru. And then the rest of the preseason, honestly, is going to fall on James Bettcher. Because we have a lot of young... Look, everyone knows this. The Giants fans know this. This past 2019 NFL draft, the New York Giants heavily focused on defense. We drafted Dexter Lawrence, DeAndre Baker, O'Shane Jimenez, Julian Love, Corey Ballantyne. And honestly, I believe that's exactly... It's probably the consecutive order of how we drafted those defensive players. So we drafted 2 defensive linemen, and we drafted 3 defensive backs. I want all those 5 guys to be getting a crap ton of snaps in preseason. Similarly to how I wanted Darius Slayton and Daniel Jones to play, I want those guys playing 2 to 3 quarters in all of the 4 preseason games. And think about this. Look, the New York Giants, a lot of people aren't concerned about the New York Giants defense heading into the season. Everyone is concerned about the quarterback position, about the wide receiver position. People actually want to see if this offensive line can actually pull its weight and meet expectations that everyone has for it. Everyone's looking to see if Saquon Barkley can replicate his year 1 stats. Everyone is so mute on this defense because I think Dave Gettleman nailed the offseason by getting a lot of young guys and a lot of talented players on this defense. We also traded in that Odell Beckham trade, as you all know. We got Jabril Peppers to replace Landon Collins. And then we still have veteran cornerback in Janoris Jenkins. So this defense, a lot of people aren't talking about it because there's no concerns there. But I think because there's no concerns there, because everyone's so quiet about this New York Giants defense, I think as a result, there's even more pressure. I think there's high expectations for the Giants, but they're quiet expectations. DeAndre Baker is expected to start day 1. I just read that in training camp so far, Julian Love has been taking snaps at safety. So most likely sometime during this regular season, we are going to see Julian Love and Jabril Peppers as our starting safeties. And Julian Love may see some time at nickel corner. And then we have another young cornerback with Grant Haley, who's apparently playing some really successful ball in defense as a nickel corner. So I want all those guys, those 3 young DBs that I mentioned. I know Grant Haley wasn't drafted this past year. He was actually, this past NFL draft. He was part of the Giants last season. But I want Grant Haley, DeAndre Baker, Julian Love to play a lot of snaps. And I know that Jabril Peppers has been in the league for 2 years, but this is his first year as a New York Giant. And he didn't get that many snaps with the Cleveland Browns because they didn't really trust him to do a lot at the safety position. So I would like for Jabril Peppers to get some playing time as well. I just want these DBs to feel some fast, excellent route running wide receivers. I want them to face explosive running backs on running plays. I just want them to play either man-to-man or zone coverage. I just want them to get a feel of the spacing as it relates to defending NFL talent wide receivers, because it's a whole different game when you get to the NFL versus when you're defending college wide receivers. In college, it's way more schemed. Receivers are way more schemed to get open than in the NFL, where in the NFL, these receivers and tight ends are so talented that their route alone is used to drive the ball down the field and create pressure on defenses. So James Bettcher has to make sure his DBs get enough reps and enough burns. I'm okay if DeAndre Baker gives up a touchdown. I'm okay if Julian Love misses an assignment. Just play those guys. Let them learn. Let them give up the big plays on offense. Let them get cracked on a route by a wide receiver. I just want to see these guys in there and learning. And then similarly to our defensive line, Dexter Lawrence was the 17th overall pick. At the 17th overall pick, I expect him to get a big load of snaps in this preseason because he's supposed to replace Snacks Harrison. They traded Snacks Harrison last year to the Detroit Lions. As a result of that, our run defense heavily dropped. It declined. We couldn't stop guys on the run. Now we got somebody to clog up the middle of that defense. So I want to see Dexter Lawrence play, and I want to see what he's got. And what I've been reading from camp, Dexter Lawrence, while he's almost as big as Snacks Harrison is and is supposed to serve the same purpose as Snacks Harrison, he is way more agile than Snacks Harrison. They have shown Dexter Lawrence doing spin moves in the 1-tech and 3-tech position. Folks, when you're in those positions from a defensive tackle perspective, you're either over the center or on the weak side shoulder of the guard. To do that in the interior of a line at that size, Dexter Lawrence is a big boy. I went to the Landon Collins softball game. I saw Dexter Lawrence. He actually signed my football, so shout out to Dexter Lawrence for that. He is a big, massive boy. To be able to move like that from what I saw, the video and the tape that I saw, was pretty impressive. And look, I don't want to say he's going to be better than Snacks Harrison because Snacks has been consistently a top 5 defensive tackle ever since he's been into the league. But we may have potentially a pass rusher from the interior, which Snacks Harrison wasn't. Harrison wasn't a pass rusher. He was a run stopper. So we may be able to get both from Dexter Lawrence. It may not be at the same productivity and level at Snacks Harrison when it came to the run defense, but he may still be decently productive enough. So I want to see Dexter Lawrence in there. And then most importantly, I want to see Oshane Jimenez, because the thing is this. I think we all know Dexter Lawrence is definitely going to start. So as a result, you want to make sure he gets enough preseason snaps so that you're comfortable with the fact that you know he can start week 1. He's obviously going to start week 1. He's a for sure starter. Immediately when he was drafted, I knew that the Giants wanted to plug him in place of Snacks. But we're still missing a pass rusher. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to address the next pick, the next defensive lineman that we ended up drafting, which is Oshane Jimenez. Oshane Jimenez was a pretty decent pass rusher, but he played at a small school, Old Dominion University. Not many players came out of that college. Very few players came out of that college. So this is going to be a big testament. That's the main guy I'd like to see, because apparently I read that at number 3 he was a steal. And that had he maybe played at a bigger school, he could have gone a little more earlier. But he played at such a small football program that his stats appear to be inflated. His pass rushing ability appears to be inflated, given that he wasn't going up against top-tier talent. So that's one point, and that's one guy that everyone should also keep an eye on, and it's very important for James Bettcher to put him in positions. And you know what? Have him pin his ears back on third down. If you don't want to place him in first and second down situations because you don't think he's ready, and that's one of the weaknesses of Oshane Jimenez is that he can't play in the run games. And usually run plays are called on first and second downs. Third downs is most likely where you'll definitely for sure get a pass play. And that's when you want to rush the quarterback. So if you don't want to play him on first and second downs in the preseason, that's fine. But let's see how Oshane Jimenez pass rushes the quarterback against top-tier NFL tackles. Because that's what we need. We need to see who can come off the edge and rush the quarterback. Who can close that gap, make the quarterback move into the pocket, and then you'll end up meeting guys like Dalvin Tomlinson and Dexter Lawrence as that quarterback sort of shifts in and out of the pocket. And this is a very, very important player, probably the most important defensive player heading into this preseason. And that's Lorenzo Carter. He was drafted last year. He's an outside linebacker out of Georgia as well. And he didn't play that much for the New York Giants. I've been lobbying for them to start Lorenzo Carter all podcast. Every single time I've dropped an episode that relates to the defense, I've dropped this man's name, Lorenzo Carter. And the reason why I think we didn't draft a pass rusher is because I think they know they have something special in Lorenzo Carter. In this preseason, they have to start Lorenzo Carter and make sure he gets a ton of snaps. I want Lorenzo Carter to play so many snaps. I want him to rule preseason. Every single game, I want to see him pop off the screen. Because guys like Jason Pierre-Paul and Olivier Vernon, they fell off the screen. But from my statistical analysis and research, he has proven in his rookie year that when the going gets tough from a defensive standpoint, when the offense is driving into Giants territory, that's when Lorenzo Carter is most effective. And another story, another tale in which those stats told me is that James Bettcher decided to play Lorenzo Carter even more in those situations because he needed more better talent as the Giants were being driven on from a defensive standpoint. So Lorenzo Carter has to play a lot of snaps. I want him to play all downs in each of the 4 preseason games. And so from a defensive line, front seven perspective, I want Dexter Lawrence to play all downs. In each of the 4 preseason games, I want Lorenzo Carter to play all downs in each of the 4 preseason games. With Oshane Jimenez, I am more than welcome to just seeing him playing on third downs in pass rushing situations because I don't want him to get exposed so early to the run games because that's one of his weaknesses. Take training camp and practices to have him work on his run defense, but in preseason and every single third down, I want him to just go after the quarterback. That's all I want him to do because imagine if we can have him do that for us in the regular season. I mean, you'd like to think a third-round pick is going to play some snaps for the New York Giants. He's definitely going to get a good amount of snaps. Again, he's not going to have starter minutes, but he's definitely going to be included in that front seven rotation for sure. So that's another person on the defense that needs to get a lot of snaps in preseason and needs to have a successful preseason. James Bettcher, out of everyone in this coaching staff, I would even say even more than Pat Shurmur as a head coach. James Bettcher as our defensive coordinator for the first time, because last year he didn't have too much talent to work with, so this year he does, and it's a lot of young talent, is going to have a lot of pressure to make sure that this team performs. What better way to identify these young guys' weaknesses is to have them in preseason. Let them get quote-unquote exposed. And I don't want to use that word because exposed always sounds wrong. It always comes into a negative light. But let those guys get the exposure and the learning experience. Jabril Peppers, first-year New York Giant. Rookies DeAndre Baker, Julian Love. Dexter Lawrence from on our defensive line, Oshane Jimenez, and then second-year outside linebacker Lorenzo Carter. If those guys have a successful preseason, then the outlook for this New York Giants defense is a positive and bright for the 2019 season. And then we can finish top 15 because I think all those players that I just mentioned will be the cornerstone for this defense for years to come. And if one of those guys doesn't plan out, then there's no way this team can be a top 15 defense heading into this year, as I expected them to be, as I'm asking James Bettcher to turn this defense in. Because we finished in the bottom half of last year, I expect us to finish in the top half this season. And equally, as I put the pressure on Pat Shurmur and talked about how he may end up being on the hot seat next season, if it clearly shows that a lot of these young guys aren't getting it done or won't be able to get it done for the New York Giants and the future of this franchise, James Bettcher will equally be on the hot seat next season. If DeAndre Baker, Julian Love, Jabril Peppers, if he can get that core young defensive group of defensive backs to be successful, if he can't put pressure on the quarterback, this is the first time that James Bettcher is going to realize that he has to get pressure on these quarterbacks. There's no excuses this season. We need to generate a pass rush this season, and he's going to have to get Dexter Lawrence, O'Shane Jimenez, B.J. Hill, Dalvin Tomlinson, and then Lorenzo Carter to provide that pressure, which is why these young guys, these first-year and second-year players, need to get consistent reps under this defense this preseason. Pat Shurmur and James Bettcher may end up being on the clock in the middle of this season, and they're going to have to show that this team can perform and that these young guys, these young draft picks were the right draft picks under their regime. Because then New York Giants fans are going to be in an uproar if the preparation for these young guys in this offseason and preseason doesn't result in a successful regular season and a successful future for this New York Giants franchise. And folks, that's my strategy and that's my take on why this preseason is the most important preseason for the New York Giants for years to come, and probably has been ever since I've been a New York Giants football fan. That's about it, folks. That wraps it up. It's your boy HP, and this was episode 16 of the Unsportsmanlike Conduct podcast. Peace out.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.